Part 1. The night everything Bernetti still remember the exact moment my life changed. It was a normal evening. At least, it looked normal from the outside. The restaurant was crowded, full of soft music, laughter, and the clinking sound of glasses. Couples sat close together. Friends told stories over plates of food. Waiters moved quickly between the tables carrying trays of steaming dishes. And I stood there, near the entrance, holding a small paper bag with a surprise gift inside. It was for my wife. Her name is Laura. That night was supposed to be special. Not an anniversary, not a birthday, just one of those evenings where you remind someone you love them. I had finished work early, bought her favorite perfume, and decided to surprise her. She had texted me earlier saying she was having dinner with a friend from work. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? For 8 years, I trusted that woman with everything I had, but something felt strange the moment I walked inside the restaurant. I saw her almost immediately. She was sitting at a table near the back, but she wasn't alone. A man sat across from her, tall, confident, wearing a dark jacket. He leaned forward slightly as he talked, and Laura laughed at something he said. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was the kind of laugh she used when she was comfortable, when she was enjoying someone's company. My first thought was simple. Maybe this is the coworker she mentioned. I told myself not to overthink it. I started walking toward their table, but before I reached them, something made me stop. The way she looked at him. I knew that look. When you spend years with someone, you learn the small things, the little details most people miss, the slight tilt of the head, the softness in the eyes, the smile that appears without effort. Laura was looking at him the same way she used to look at me years ago. A strange feeling formed in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just confusion. I stepped behind a large pillar near the middle of the restaurant so they couldn't see me. I didn't know why I did that. Maybe some part of me already knew. I watched them for a few minutes. They talked, they smiled, they leaned closer across the table. Then something happened that made my stomach twist. He reached across the table and gently touched her hand. Laura didn't pull away. Instead, she held his hand. My heart started beating faster. My mind immediately tried to protect me. I misunderstand it. But it's nothing. Maybe this is normal between friends. But deep down, I already knew. Then Laura looked around the restaurant quickly, as if she wanted to make sure no one she knew was there. My chest tightened. She stood up from the table. The man stood up too. They didn't say anything. They simply walked together, toward the hallway that led to the restrooms, side by side, close enough that their arms touched. I felt something inside me drop. It's a strange feeling when your world begins to break apart. There is no loud explosion and no dramatic sound, just silence, heavy silence. I slowly walked toward the hallway. Each step felt strange, like my legs didn't belong to me anymore. I stopped before the corner that turned toward the restrooms. Their voices were low, but I could hear small pieces of their conversation. Laura was whispering. Then I heard something that made my chest burn. She laughed softly and said, "Relax. He thinks I'm at dinner with a coworker." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The man laughed. Then he said something I'll never forget. "That guy is clueless." Clueless. That word echoed in my head. I stood there, frozen. 8 years. 8 years of love. 8 years of loyalty. 8 years of working overtime, saving money, building a life together. And to them, I was just a joke. I slowly leaned a little closer to the corner, just enough to see them. The hallway was quiet. The restaurant noise didn't reach this far. The man stood very close to her now, too close. Laura placed her hand on his chest. Then she kissed him. Not a quick kiss, not a mistake. A slow, comfortable kiss, like they had done it many times before. My chest felt empty, not even pain, just emptiness. It's strange how the human mind works. You expect anger, you expect screaming, you expect chaos. But sometimes, the shock is so deep that it steals every emotion. They moved toward the restroom door together. Laura looked around one more time, then they disappeared inside. The door closed, and just like that, 8 years of my life felt like a lie. I stood in that hallway for what felt like hours, but it was probably only a few minutes. My mind started showing me memories. The first day I met Laura, the day we got married, the night we moved into our small apartment, all the promises, all the plans, all the sacrifices. I worked double shifts when she wanted to go back to school. I sold my old motorcycle when we needed money. I believed in her dreams. I supported her. I trusted her. And now, she was in a restroom with another man. I suddenly felt something hot behind my eyes. Tears. But I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not for this. A waiter walked past the hallway carrying a tray of dishes. The smell of grilled meat and spices followed him. For some reason, my feet began moving. Not toward the restroom. Not toward the exit, but toward the kitchen. I didn't fully understand why. Maybe I just needed to move. Maybe I needed air. Maybe I needed to escape the image in my head. The kitchen was loud. Very loud. Pans hitting metal counters. Oil sizzling. Cooks shouting orders. Steam rising from pots. The heat hit my face immediately. And no one paid attention to me. Everyone was too busy working. I walked deeper inside until I stood near one of the large stoves. Bright blue flames danced under several heavy pans. I stared at the fire. Something about it felt calming. One of the cooks stepped away from the stove to grab something from a shelf. Without thinking, I reached forward and turned the knob of an empty burner. Click. Then whoosh. A strong blue flame appeared. It rose quickly, bright and powerful. I stood there watching it. The flame moved wildly, alive and restless. For a long moment, I didn't move. My mind was still replaying the scene in the hallway. Laura's laugh, the man's voice, that kiss. Clueless. The word echoed again in my head. I slowly leaned closer to the burner. The heat touched my face. Warm, sharp, real, unlike the fake life I had been living. For the first time since entering the restaurant, I felt something. Not sadness. Not anger. Something else. Something deeper. Something dangerous. It felt like a spark forming inside my chest. A small spark, but growing quickly. The flame in front of me reflected in the metal surface of the stove. Two flames. One outside. One inside me. And for the first time that night, a thought appeared in my mind. A clear thought. A calm thought. If they thought I was clueless, if they thought I was weak, then maybe it was time to prove them wrong. I watched the burner flame rise higher. The fire danced wildly in front of me, and as I stood there in that loud kitchen, staring at the burning flame, something inside me began to change. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do next, but one thing became very clear. The man who walked into that restaurant earlier that evening, the man who trusted blindly, the man who lived his entire life for someone else, that man was starting to disappear, and, in his place, someone new was beginning to wake up. Part 2. The fire of humiliation. The flame in front of me moved wildly, dancing above the burner like it had a mind of its own. The kitchen around me was loud. Pans slammed against metal counters. Oil hissed as it touched hot surfaces. Cooks shouted orders to each other. But somehow, I barely heard any of it. My entire focus was on that small blue flame, and on the storm growing inside my chest. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. The heat brushed against my face, warm and sharp. It felt almost comforting, like the fire understood something that I didn't. Just a few minutes ago, my life had been normal. I had walked into that restaurant with a small gift in my hand. I had imagined Laura smiling when she saw me. I imagined her laughing, maybe even teasing me for being romantic. Instead, she was in a restroom with another man. My wife. The woman I trusted more than anyone in this world. The cook who had stepped away from the stove returned, grabbed a pan, and threw some vegetables into it. They sizzled loudly as they touched the hot surface. He didn't even look at me. To him, I was just another man standing in a busy kitchen. He had no idea that my entire world had just collapsed, and strangely, that thought made me feel even more alone. I turned the burner knob slightly higher. The flame grew stronger. The blue color turned brighter, almost white at the center. For a moment, I imagined throwing something into it. Something heavy, something that would burn completely. But what? My anger? My memories? My marriage? My mind started showing me pictures from the past. Not happy ones. Painful ones. Memories I had ignored before. I remember the nights Laura came home late and said she had extra work. I remembered the times she hit her phone screen when I walked into the room. I remembered the sudden gym memberships, the new clothes, the sudden need to look perfect whenever she left the house. Back then, I told myself I was lucky to have such a beautiful wife. Now realize something different. Maybe she wasn't changing for me. Maybe she was changing for someone else. A heavy weight settled in my stomach. How long had this been happening? Weeks? Months? Maybe longer. The thought made my hands tighten into fists. I wasn't just betrayed tonight. I had been betrayed for a long time. And I never saw it. Because I trusted her. Because I believed love meant loyalty. Because I believed promises actually meant something. Suddenly, I heard laughter from the hallway outside the kitchen. My heart skipped. For a second, I thought it might be Laura. My body became tense, but the voices passed by and disappeared. Not them. I slowly released the breath I didn't realize I was holding. My eyes returned to the flame. The fire was steady now, burning calmly, unlike the chaos inside my head. The worst part of betrayal is not the anger, it's the humiliation. The feeling that someone you loved made you look like a fool. Remembered the man's voice again. That guy is clueless. The words echoed in my mind like a hammer hitting metal. Clueless. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been blind. I worked long hours every week. Sometimes 12 hours a day. Sometimes more. I told myself I was doing it for us. For our future. For our dreams. But what if Laura didn't care about any of that? What if, while I was breaking my back to build our life, she was laughing about me with someone else? The thought made my chest burn. A different kind of fire. Not the one in front of me. This one was deeper. I suddenly remembered something from 2 years ago. We had been at a small party with some of Laura's friends. One of the men there had made a joke. He said something like, "You're lucky, Laura. Your husband works so hard. That's rare these days." Everyone laughed politely, but Laura had rolled her eyes slightly. It was a small thing. So small I ignored it, but now remembered exactly what she said. Yeah, he works hard. That's kind of his whole personality. People laughed again. The time I laughed too. But now realized what that laugh really meant. She didn't respect me. Not really. To her, I wasn't a partner. I was just the hard-working husband. The reliable one. The boring one. The safe one. And while I was busy being responsible, she was chasing excitement somewhere else. I leaned forward and placed both hands on the metal counter near the stove. The surface was cold. Very cold. It felt strange compared to the heat of the burner. My reflection appeared faintly in the shiny metal. I looked tired, older than I remembered, lines around my eyes, a face that had spent too many years worrying about responsibilities. I stared at that reflection for a long moment, and suddenly, a question appeared in my mind. Who am I now? Because the life I believed in just minutes ago no longer existed. The man I thought I was had been living in a lie. The door to the kitchen swung open suddenly. A waiter rushed inside carrying an empty tray. "Table 12 needs another steak," he shouted. No one paid attention to me. Everyone kept working. The world outside was still moving normally. Customers were still eating. Music was still playing. Life was continuing exactly the same. But my life had stopped. It felt like I was standing between two different versions of reality. One was the life I used to know. The other was something unknown. Something dark. Something painful. But somewhere inside that darkness, something else was forming. Something strong. I straightened my back and looked at the flame again. For a moment, I imagined walking back to the restroom hallway. I imagined opening the door. I imagined dragging that man out by his collar. I imagined screaming at Laura in front of everyone in the restaurant. The images played clearly in my head. It would be easy. One moment of anger, one explosion, but then what? Police? Shame? A messy divorce? More humiliation? I exhaled slowly. No, that wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't erase what I saw. It wouldn't fix the past. It would only destroy whatever dignity I had left. I stared deeper into the flame, and then something strange happened. Instead of thinking about Laura, I started thinking about myself, about the man I had become. When was the last time I did something just for me? When was the last time I felt proud of myself? When was the last time I looked in the mirror and saw a man who respected himself? I couldn't remember. Somewhere along the way, I had built my entire life around someone else. Her happiness, her dreams, her comfort, and in the process, I forgot about my own. The flame flickered slightly. For a moment, it almost looked like it was breathing. Alive, strong, controlled. I slowly reached forward and adjusted the knob again. The fire grew taller, brighter. The heat became stronger. And suddenly, a strange thought appeared in my mind. Maybe this wasn't the end of my life. Maybe this was the moment everything changed. Maybe this humiliation, this pain, this betrayal, was actually a beginning. The beginning of something new, something different, something stronger. I stood there silently, letting the heat touch my face. And in that moment, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would never beg for love again. I would never chase someone who didn't respect me. And I would never allow anyone to make me feel small again. Behind me, the kitchen door opened once more. Footsteps entered. Soft footsteps. My body became tense again. I didn't turn around, but a voice I knew very well spoke from behind me. Hey, what are you doing back here? Laura. Her voice sounded slightly nervous. I slowly closed my eyes for a second. The flame continued burning in front of me. Strong, steady, and when I finally opened my eyes again, I knew something important. The man she married. The man who trusted her blindly. The man who believed every word she said. That man was gone. And the man standing in this kitchen, watching the fire rise, was not the same person anymore. Part 3. The moment I changed, Laura's voice came from behind me. Hey, what are you doing back here? For a moment, I didn't move. The flame in front of me kept burning, steady and bright. The heat touched my face, but I barely felt it anymore. My mind was focused on something else, on the sound of her voice. For years, that voice meant comfort to me. It meant home. It meant safety. Now, it felt different, cold, unfamiliar, almost like hearing a stranger speak. I slowly turned around. Laura was standing near the kitchen door. Her hair was slightly messy, like she had rushed to fix it. Her lipstick looked a little smudged. She tried to smile when she saw me, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Behind her, the loud kitchen continued, working like nothing had happened. Cooks shouted orders, knives chopped vegetables, oil popped in frying pans. But between us, there was silence. For a few seconds, she just stared at me. Then she forced a small laugh. I was wondering where you disappeared to, she said. Her voice sounded casual, too casual, like this was just a normal night, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't walked into a restroom with another man just minutes ago. I looked at her face carefully. Something inside me felt strange. I expected anger. I expected pain. But instead, there was a strange calm spreading inside my chest. Maybe the fire had burned something away. Laura stepped closer. Why are you standing here? She asked. This area is for staff. I noticed something then. She wasn't asking how I got here. She wasn't asking why I looked upset. She wasn't worried. She was only confused. That told me everything I needed to know. She still didn't realize that I knew. I slowly glanced back at the burner flame for a moment. Then I turned the knob down slightly. The flame became smaller, controlled. Laura crossed her arms. You're acting weird, she said. Did something happen? I studied her face again. This woman had been my world for 8 years. 8 years of memories. 8 years of trust. 8 years of believing we were building something real. And now, I was standing here, again, realizing something painful. Didn't actually know her anymore. Or maybe, I never did. Yeah, I said quietly. Her eyebrows moved slightly. Yeah, what? She asked. Something happened. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. What happened? I looked at her directly in the eyes. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to please her. I wasn't trying to read her emotions or adjust my words to keep her happy. I was simply observing her, like a stranger, and suddenly, something inside me clicked. It was like a lock opening. For years, I had built my identity around being her husband. Everything I did was connected to that role. Working hard, being responsible, supporting her dreams, protecting our relationship. But now I saw the truth. That version of me existed only because I believed she deserved it. And clearly, she didn't. Laura waited for me to continue. When I didn't speak, she sighed. Look, if you're upset because I didn't tell you about dinner tonight, I was just meeting a coworker. It's not a big deal. Coworker. The word hung in the air between us. For a second, I almost laughed. The lie sounded so small now. So weak. So pointless. But what surprised me most was something else. I didn't feel the need to argue. I didn't feel the need to expose her. I didn't even feel the need to explain what I had seen, because suddenly, it didn't matter anymore. The truth had already changed something inside me. Laura took another step closer. You're being dramatic, she said lightly. Come back to the table. My friend is waiting. My friend. I looked at her carefully again. The same woman who kissed another man minutes ago was now asking me to sit at the same table with him. That level of disrespect was almost impressive. And in that moment, something inside my mind became crystal clear. This woman had no respect for me. Not a little. Not secretly. None at all. And the strange thing was, realizing that truth made me feel lighter, like a heavy chain had just fallen off my shoulders. Laura noticed my silence. Why are you looking at me like that? She asked. Like what? I replied calmly. Like. She paused, searching for the word. Like you're judging me. I thought about that for a moment. Then I shook my head slightly. Oh, said. I'm not judging you. She frowned. Then what are you doing? I looked past her for a second, toward the kitchen door. Beyond that door was the restaurant. Beyond the restaurant was the city. Beyond the city was an entire world full of possibilities. A world I had ignored for years, because I was busy protecting a relationship that clearly didn't deserve protection. Then I looked back at her. I'm just seeing things clearly, I said. She looked confused. What does that mean? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached forward and turned the burner knob completely off. The flame disappeared instantly. The heat faded. Only a faint smell of gas and metal remained. I stared at the empty burner for a moment. Then a strange thought entered my mind. That flame had been burning just minutes ago. Strong, wild, alive. And now it was gone. Just like my old life. Just like my old identity. Laura tapped her foot impatiently. Can you please explain what's going on? She asked. I finally looked at her again. For the first time that night, I noticed something interesting. She looked slightly nervous now. Maybe my calmness was confusing her. Maybe she expected anger. Maybe she expected shouting. But I wasn't giving her that. Instead, I simply nodded once. You're right, I said. Her expression changed. About what? I'm acting weird. She blinked. Okay. So that means something is changed. Laura shook her head slightly. I have no idea what you're talking about. I believed her. Because she still thought this moment was about her. She still thought this was just a small argument. She had no idea that something much bigger was happening inside me. Inside my mind. Inside my future. I took a slow breath. Then I stepped past her toward the kitchen door. Where are you going? She asked quickly. Out, I said. Out where? Home. She looked surprised. But we just ordered dinner. I paused at the door. For a second, I considered telling her everything. Telling her what I saw. Telling her what I heard. Watching her reaction. Watching her try to lie her way out of it. But then I realized something important. I didn't need that. I didn't need closure. I didn't need explanations. I didn't need excuses. What I needed was distance. Distance from the lies. Distance from the humiliation. Distance from the person who made me forget my own worth. I opened the kitchen door. The sounds of the restaurant became louder again. Before stepping out, I turned my head slightly. Laura was still standing there, confused and annoyed. "Hey," she said sharply, "you can't just leave." I looked at her one last time, and for the first time in 8 years, I saw her exactly as she was. Not as my wife. Not as my partner. Just as a person who made her choices, and those choices had consequences. I gave a small nod. Then I said something simple. "Watch me." And with that, I walked out of the kitchen, out of the restaurant, out of the life I thought I had. The night air outside felt cold against my face, but for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. Because the man who walked into that restaurant earlier that evening, the man who believed his happiness depended on someone else, that man was gone, and the man walking into the dark street now was ready to build something completely different. Something strong, something that no one could betray ever again. Part 4. Walking away. Cold night air hit my face the moment I stepped out of the restaurant. For a second, I just stood there. The sounds from inside the building were still faintly audible, people laughing, glasses clinking, music playing softly in the background. Life inside continued as if nothing had happened, but for me, everything had changed. I slowly walked down the sidewalk. The streetlights above me cast long shadows on the ground. Cars passed by, their headlights flashing briefly across the pavement. Somewhere down the street, a couple laughed loudly as they walked past a cafe. The world looked exactly the same, but I felt like I was seeing it for the first time. My hands were in my pockets as I walked. The small paper bag with Laura's gift was still there. I had completely forgotten about it. I stopped walking and pulled the bag out. Inside was the perfume I bought for her, her favorite brand. I remembered standing in the store earlier that evening, carefully choosing it. I had even asked the salesperson to wrap it nicely, because I wanted Laura to smile when she opened it. Now, the box felt strangely heavy in my hand. I stared at it for a few seconds, then I gave a small, tired smile. Funny, I whispered to myself, a gift for someone who was already giving herself to someone else. For a moment, I thought about throwing it into a nearby trash can, but I didn't. Instead, I simply put it back in the bag and kept walking. If the city felt different tonight, the air was colder, the lights seemed brighter, or maybe my mind was just clearer. When your life breaks apart suddenly, something strange happens. Your brain starts replaying everything, every conversation, every moment, every small sign you ignored. As I walked, memories of Laura kept appearing in my mind. The way she used to look at me years ago, the way she used to hold my hand when we walked together, the way she used to laugh at my terrible jokes. Back then, I truly believed we were happy. Maybe we were, or maybe I was the only one who believed it. I reached an intersection and stopped at the red light. Cars rushed past in both directions. I watched them quietly. Each driver was heading somewhere. Each person had their own story, their own struggles, their own dreams. For the first time in a long time, I asked myself a simple question. Where am I heading? For years, the answer had always been the same. Home.to Laura.to our life together. But tonight, I wasn't sure what home even meant anymore. The light turned green. I crossed the street slowly. A strange calmness had settled inside me. Not happiness. Not yet. But something close to peace. Because I had already made a decision. I wasn't going back to that restaurant, and I wasn't going back to the man I used to be. When I reached my car, I sat inside for a moment without starting the engine. The steering wheel felt cold under my hands. The quiet inside the car felt almost comforting. For the first time that night, my phone vibrated. Laura, her name appeared on the screen. She was calling. I stared at the phone as it rang. Part of me expected this. Of course, she would call. She probably wanted to know why I suddenly left. Maybe she was worried about what I saw. Maybe she just wanted to control the situation. The phone kept vibrating, but I didn't answer. Instead, I placed it on the passenger seat. A few seconds later, it vibrated again. Another call. Then another. Then a message notification. I didn't look at it. Not yet. Instead, I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. The images from earlier returned again. Laura, the man, the hallway, the kiss. But something was different this time. The images didn't hurt as much. They felt distant, like they belonged to someone else's life. Maybe because in some way, they did. The man who loved Laura without question. The man who trusted her completely. He was slowly disappearing, and in his place, a new version of me was forming. I opened my eyes again. The phone vibrated once more. This time I picked it up. 5 missed calls. 3 messages. I opened the first message. Where did you go? The second message appeared below it. Why are you acting like this? The third message came a minute later. You're embarrassing me. Come back. I stared at the screen for a moment, embarrassing her. That was interesting. She had just walked into a restroom with another man, and somehow, I was the one embarrassing her. A small laugh escaped my mouth. Not an angry laugh. Just a tired one. For years, I had been trying to avoid upsetting her, trying to keep the peace, trying to be the perfect husband. But tonight, something inside me had changed. I typed a short reply. Just 4 words. Don't wait for me. Then I turned off the phone. I placed it back on the passenger seat and started the car. The engine hummed quietly. I drove through the city streets, watching the lights pass by. My mind felt strangely empty now. Not full of anger, not full of sadness, just quiet. When I finally reached our apartment building, I parked the car and sat there for a moment. This place had been our home for 6 years. Every corner of it held memories. Movie nights on the couch, late-night conversations in the kitchen, arguments that ended in apologies. But now, I wasn't sure if those memories were real, or if they were just illusions I wanted to believe. I walked upstairs and unlocked the apartment door. The inside was silent. Laura hadn't come home yet. Of course, she hadn't. She was still at the restaurant, with him. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The familiar smell of our apartment greeted me. Coffee, laundry detergent, the faint scent of Laura's perfume. I placed the gift bag on the kitchen counter. For a moment, I just stood there looking around. The couch, the TV, the photos on the wall. One photo caught my attention. It was from our honeymoon. Laura and I were standing on a beach, smiling at the camera. We looked happy, young, hopeful. I walked over and picked up the frame. My fingers brushed across the glass. For years, I believed that photo represented the beginning of our perfect life. Now, I saw it differently. It was just a moment, one small moment in time. And moments can change. People can change. Relationships can break. I placed the photo back on the shelf. Then, I walked into the bedroom. Laura's clothes were scattered on the chair near the window. Her shoes were near the door. Everything looked normal, but it didn't feel normal anymore. I opened the closet and pulled out a small suitcase. Not a big one, just enough for a few days. Because I knew something important. I couldn't stay here tonight. Not in this space. Not surrounded by memories that no longer meant anything. As I packed a few clothes, my mind felt clear. This wasn't running away. This was stepping back, creating distance, giving myself time to think, time to rebuild. When the suitcase was ready, I closed it and stood quietly in the middle of the room. The apartment was still silent, but the silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt peaceful. I picked up the gift bag from the kitchen and placed it beside the photo frame. Laura would see it when she came home. Maybe she would understand what it meant. Maybe she wouldn't, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I grabbed my suitcase and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I took one last look at the apartment, the place where I had spent years trying to build a future. Then I turned off the lights and stepped outside. Because sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is simply walk away. Part 5. The receipt. First night away from the apartment felt strange. I checked into a small hotel on the other side of the city. It wasn't fancy, just a quiet place with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked down at the street. When I placed my suitcase on the floor, The silence in the room felt different from the silence at the apartment. This silence belonged to me. And oh, memories on the walls. And oh, shared furniture. And oh, photos of a life that no longer existed. Just an empty room. And a man who had to figure out what came next. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands for a long time. The events of the night kept replaying in my head like a movie. The restaurant. The hallway. The kiss. Laura's confused face in the kitchen. And the moment I walked out. At first, the memories felt heavy, but slowly, something else began to appear inside me. Clarity. For years, my life had followed the same routine. Wake up. Work long hours. Come home. Plan everything around Laura. Her happiness had been my mission. Her dreams had become my goals. But sitting alone, in that hotel room, I realized something shocking. I had forgotten what my own dreams were. Somewhere along the way, I stopped asking myself what I wanted, and that thought stayed with me the entire night. I barely slept. Not because I was sad, but because my mind kept thinking about something new. Freedom. The next morning, sunlight entered the room through the window. The city outside was already alive. Cars moved through the streets. People walked quickly to their jobs. Coffee shops opened their doors. Life was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to move forward too. I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror above the desk. The man staring back at me looked tired, but his eyes looked different, clearer, stronger. He had finally woken up. All right, I said quietly to my reflection, let's start again. That day became the first step of my new life. At first, things were simple. I extended my stay at the hotel for another week, then another. During the day, I went to work like usual, but something had changed inside me. Before, I worked because I had to. Now, I worked because I wanted control over my future. I started arriving earlier, leaving later, learning new skills, paying attention to opportunities I used to ignore. My coworkers noticed the difference quickly. One afternoon, my manager stopped by my desk. You've been working like a machine lately, he said. I shrugged slightly, just focused. He nodded slowly. Well, keep it up. What he didn't know was that the pain from that night had become fuel. Every time I felt tired, I remembered the man laughing in the hallway. Every time I wanted to quit early, I remembered Laura saying I was boring. And every time I pushed myself harder, I felt stronger. Weeks turned into months. During that time, Laura tried contacting me many times. Calls, messages, emails. At first, I ignored them. Then eventually, I sent a short message. I know everything. I need space. Her replies became longer after that. Apologies, excuses, promises. But something inside me had already changed. The man who used to believe those promises didn't exist anymore. So I stayed silent. Instead of thinking about the past, I focused on building something new. 3 months after that night, something unexpected happened at work. Our company announced a new project, a big one. It required someone to manage a small team and develop a new system for the business. Most people avoided the responsibility. It meant long hours and serious pressure. But when my manager asked if anyone was interested, I raised my hand. He looked surprised. You're sure? He asked. Yeah, I said calmly, I'm sure. That decision changed everything. The project was difficult. Sometimes I worked 12 hours a day, sometimes even more, but every challenge made me stronger. I learned how to lead people, how to solve problems quickly, how to stay calm under pressure. And, slowly, people began to respect me in a way they hadn't before. One evening, after a long meeting, my manager pulled me aside. You know, he said, I didn't expect this from you. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? He smiled slightly. You always seemed like a quiet guy. Reliable, but not ambitious. I thought about that for a moment. Then I smiled. People change. 6 months after that night at the restaurant, the project was finished. It was a success. A big success. The company expanded its operations because of it. And during the celebration meeting, something happened that I never expected. The CEO walked into the room. He shook my hand in front of everyone. Excellent work, he said. "You've done something impressive here." Then he turned to my manager. "We need people like him in leadership roles." My manager nodded, and just like that, my life took another step forward. 2 weeks later, I received a promotion, a higher position, a higher salary, more responsibility, more respect. That evening, I walked out of the office building and looked up at the city skyline. The lights glittered across the buildings, cars moved through the streets like glowing rivers, and for the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Not because someone loved me, not because someone approved of me, but because I had built something with my own strength. Because I had turned pain into power. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A message from Laura. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. The message was short. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a moment. 6 months ago, that message would have controlled my emotions. It would have made my heart race. It would have filled my mind with hope or fear. But now, it felt like reading a message from someone I barely knew. I put the phone back into my pocket without replying, because my life was no longer connected to hers. And as I stood there under the city lights, I realized something powerful. The night she betrayed me, the night I watched her walk into that restroom with another man, that night had felt like the end of everything. But now I understood the truth. It wasn't the end. It was the moment my real life began. Part 6. The unexpected reunions passed after that night, and life kept moving forward in ways I had never imagined. I changed jobs, moved into a small apartment of my own, and started spending my evenings on things I actually enjoyed: reading, running, learning new skills. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, not for someone else. And then, I saw her. It happened on a Thursday evening. I had just finished a meeting with a client downtown. The sky was painted with gold and pink, and the streets were full of people rushing home from work. I was walking toward the metro station when someone called my name. "Hey." I turned. It was Laura. Her hair was tied back neatly, her coat fitted, and she was wearing that same perfume I had bought for her months ago. She looked different. Not the woman I thought I knew. Not the one I had left behind in that restaurant hallway, but the recognition was instant. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice slightly shaky. For a second, I just looked at her. Part of me wanted to turn away and walk off, just like I had walked out of her life months ago. Part of me wanted to hear what she had to say, but I realized something quickly. This wasn't going to be the same man she remembered. "I'm listening," I said finally, my voice calm, steady, not angry, not desperate, calm. She took a deep breath. I made a huge mistake. I was stupid." I stopped her with a hand. "Save it. I don't need excuses." She blinked, confused. You don't know," I said. "Because I've spent the past months building my life. My life doesn't revolve around your mistakes anymore." Her lips pressed together. I could see a flicker of something in her eyes: regret, maybe even fear. But it wasn't my problem anymore. I had already moved past that part of my life. I know I hurt you. I shouldn't have done what I did. I want you to know I'm not interested in your words," I said, stepping closer, but keeping my tone even. "I'm interested in actions, and the only action that matters is the life I'm building for myself." Laura swallowed hard. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she tried again. "But I miss you. I want to fix things. We can start over." Her words barely registered with me. I took a deep breath and let the city's sounds wash over me: honking cars, people chatting, distant sirens. All of it felt distant, because my focus was on one thing: myself. "Start over?" I said slowly, letting the words sink in. "You think I'm the same man you left behind?" She shook her head quickly. "No, yes," I interrupted. I'm not the man who trusted blindly. I'm not the man who built his happiness around someone else's approval. I'm not the man who allowed himself to be humiliated." She stepped back slightly, the reality of what I was saying sinking in. Her eyes widened as she realized this wasn't the weak, desperate man she had betrayed. I continued. "You see, the man who walked into that restaurant months ago, the man who believed everything you said, he's gone, and I won't be coming back." I won't be begging, I won't be hoping, because I've realized something important. My life is mine. My happiness is mine. My success is mine. And it doesn't need anyone to approve of it. Laura's lips trembled. I didn't realize. I didn't know. I know, I said calmly, and it's too late. What I am now, this version of me, was forged by your betrayal, by the fire of that night, by the humiliation and the anger. All of it became fuel for something stronger, something better, and I'm not giving it away to someone who doesn't respect it. Her face fell. I could see the guilt, the regret, and even a hint of desperation. But it didn't matter. That was her burden. My burden was my own life, my own success, and my own peace. She took a step closer, almost pleading. Please, can we just talk? Can we try? I raised my hand gently, stopping her. No, I've spent months learning something important. I've learned to love myself, to respect myself, to prioritize my own life. And the moment I let you back in, I'd be giving away everything I've worked for, everything I've become. I won't do that. Laura's eyes filled with tears. For a moment, I felt a tiny pang. Not for her, not for what I had lost, but for the version of myself I had been, the man who still believed in fairy tales, who still thought love was enough to hold someone together. That man was gone. You've changed, she whispered. Yes, I said, my voice steady, strong. I have, and I will keep changing, but not for you, not for anyone. I will change for me, because I finally understand something very simple. The only person I need to impress is myself. She looked at me for a long time, then slowly, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I watched her go, feeling nothing but relief, and then I took a deep breath and smiled. For the first time in years, I felt truly free, because freedom doesn't come from running away. It comes from realizing your own strength. I continued walking through the streets, letting the cool evening air fill my lungs. Each step I took felt lighter, more confident. Each step reminded me that I didn't need anyone to validate me, that my success, my happiness, my life, they were mine. That night, I went home alone. My apartment smelled like fresh laundry, and the city lights reflected in the windows. I poured a glass of water and sat by the window, looking out at the skyline. I thought about everything that had happened: the betrayal, the humiliation, the fire in the restaurant kitchen. I realized it was all part of a journey. I hadn't understood it first. The betrayal had hurt. The humiliation had burned. But that pain had been necessary, because without it, I wouldn't have found my own strength. Without it, I wouldn't have realized my own worth. Without it, I wouldn't have become the man I am today. And now, as I sat there, looking at the city that stretched endlessly before me, I made a quiet promise. No one would ever control me again. No one would ever make me doubt my worth again. No one would ever make me feel small or powerless, because I had discovered something far stronger than love, far stronger than marriage, far stronger than anyone's approval. I had discovered myself, and that was the most powerful thing in the world. The next day, I returned to my routines: work, training, learning, building my life. But something had shifted. People noticed it immediately. My coworkers, my friends, even strangers on the street could see it in my posture, my voice, my confidence. I walked differently. I spoke differently. I existed differently. It was as if the fire from that night had burned away every doubt, every fear, every insecurity. And from the ashes, a new man had risen. Laura never tried to reach out again. And even if she had, it wouldn't have mattered. Because the man she once knew, the man who loved her blindly, no longer existed. Instead, a man who valued himself first, who demanded respect, and who refused to let anyone diminish his worth, existed. I had survived betrayal. I had survived humiliation. And now, I was thriving. I smiled, taking a long sip of water, and whispered to myself, some things break you, so that you can rebuild yourself stronger than ever. And in that moment, I finally understood that life doesn't give second chances to those who wait for others. It gives second chances to those who rise for themselves. I had risen, and I would never stop rising. Part 7. Rising stronger. The morning sun came softly through the window, painting golden streaks across the floor. I sat on the edge of my bed, drinking my coffee slowly, letting the warmth seep through me. The city outside was alive, moving fast, but I felt calm, powerful calm, like I had finally found the center of my own life. Months had passed since that night in the restaurant, and life had changed in ways I never thought possible. I was no longer the man who had walked into a betrayal, humiliated, angry, and confused. That man didn't exist anymore. The man I had become, strong, self-aware, unstoppable, stood tall. It wasn't just about work or money. Yes, I had built a career, earned respect, and created independence I never had before. But the real change was inside me. It was in how I carried myself, how I treated myself, how I refused to allow anyone to control my emotions or my life. I remembered the nights I spent alone in that small hotel room, thinking about her, thinking about betrayal, thinking about the life I had lost. At first, it felt unbearable. The loneliness pressed on me like a heavy weight. But slowly, something remarkable happened. I realized that loneliness was not punishment, it was freedom in disguise. It was space to breathe, space to think, space to grow. I started running early in the mornings. The cold wind hitting my face woke something in me. I had long forgotten my own strength. I started reading books that challenged me, learning new skills, and meeting people who inspired me. I didn't just rebuild myself, I upgraded myself. Every day became a choice to be better, to be stronger, to be fully alive. One evening, I walked into a small cafe downtown. The aroma of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. I chose a corner table by the window and opened my notebook. I began writing down goals, dreams, things I had pushed aside for years while I focused on someone else's happiness. And then, I saw her, Laura. She was sitting at the next table, looking at her phone, waiting for someone, or maybe for herself. She didn't see me, or maybe she did, but she didn't recognize me, because this was not the man she knew. I smiled quietly to myself. I wasn't angry, I wasn't hurt, I didn't feel any need to confront her. I had no reason. She had played her part in my story, and now I was writing the next chapters without her. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and let the sunlight warm me. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable, not in a sense of arrogance, but in the sense that my happiness was mine alone. My confidence didn't depend on anyone else. My life didn't hinge on someone else's choices. Weeks turned into months. I kept growing. I started a small side business on the weekends, something I had always dreamed about but had never pursued because I thought life was about compromise. Now I realized life is about creating your own rules, making your own path, and nothing and no one could stop me. One evening, while closing my notebook, I looked at my reflection in the cafe window. The man staring back at me was different from the man who had entered that restaurant months ago. There was a fire in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not the destructive fire of anger, but the burning confidence of someone who knows their own worth. It hit me suddenly. I had survived betrayal. I had survived humiliation. And through that pain, I had found my power. The very thing that once broke me had forged me into someone better, stronger, unstoppable. I remembered that night in the restaurant, the flame on the burner, the humiliation, the anger, and how, instead of letting it destroy me, I had turned it into fuel. Fuel to leave, fuel to rebuild, fuel to rise. I smiled, because I knew something simple and important. Life isn't about waiting for the right people to respect you. Life is about demanding it from yourself first. Respect yourself, love yourself, protect your own happiness before giving it to anyone else. And as the months passed, people noticed. Friends and coworkers saw the new energy in me. Some were inspired, others were envious. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet, undeniable truth I carried inside me. I was no longer a victim. I was the hero of my own story. I started traveling, exploring places I had only dreamed about. Mountains, beaches, cities full of history. Every step I took reminded me that the world was vast, and my life could be whatever I chose it to be. And every night, before sleep, I reminded myself, I don't need permission to live fully. I don't need approval to be happy. I am enough. And then one night, I had a dream. I was back in the restaurant, standing at the burner, watching the flame. But this time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't humiliated. I smiled at the fire because I knew what it had given me. The courage to rise, to walk away, to claim my life, to become the man I was always meant to be. I woke up with the sun streaming through the window, and I whispered to myself, quietly, powerfully, I survived betrayal, I survived pain, and I am unstoppable. That day, I decided to write about my journey, not for anyone else, not for lore, not for validation, but to remind myself, and maybe others, that life doesn't end when people betray you. Life begins when you choose to rise from the ashes. I wrote about anger, about humiliation, about walking away from someone you loved but who didn't deserve you. I wrote about fear, about loneliness, about learning to trust yourself again. I wrote about fire, the kind that burns everything down, only to leave room for new growth. And as I wrote, I realized something profound. Empowerment isn't about revenge. It isn't about proving someone wrong. Empowerment is claiming your life back. It's standing tall when everything inside you wants to collapse. It's finding your own worth when someone else tried to take it away. Months turned into a year, and my life continued to thrive. I had built independence, success, and confidence that no one could shake. And somewhere deep inside, I knew something even more important. The man I had become would never let anyone break him again. One evening, I walked through the park, the cool wind brushing against my face. Children played, couples laughed, people jogged past me. Life was alive, messy, beautiful, and full of possibilities. I felt it all, every moment, every heartbeat, every breath, and in that moment, I whispered again. This time not just to myself, but to the universe. I am stronger than betrayal. I am stronger than pain. I am stronger than anyone who ever doubted me. I am unstoppable. I am alive. And I will rise. Every single time, smiled, because I knew it was true. No one could ever take this power away from me. No one could ever dim this light. The man who walked into that restaurant months ago, betrayed, humiliated, heartbroken, he was gone. The man standing here, walking through the park, breathing in the freedom, chasing his dreams, and building his own destiny. He was unstoppable. And that, I realized, is the greatest power anyone can ever have. Not just surviving, but rising stronger. Every single time life tries to break you. Because life will always test you. People will always betray you. But the fire inside, the fire you forge yourself, that fire will always make you rise. And rise I did, stronger, wiser, unstoppable, free. This is my story, my truth, my rise. And it isn't over. It's only the beginning.